welcome everybody for our next Fireside Chat with Austin Griffith, probably a man that needs no introduction within this community. We're going to be talking today on iterative product development as a way to gain user traction and adoption. Austin, just in case people don't know who you are, what you're working on, would love for you to just quickly introduce yourself.
Word, yeah, thanks. So I would say I'm a dApp developer, right? A builder in the space, trying to make things more user friendly, I think is a good way to put it. Yeah, right. Like we're going for adoption, we're going for onboarding. We just want these really cool projects within the space that have and run on really neat technology to be more accessible and get the users they deserve.
That's awesome. Awesome. So cool. I actually want to go back to your early days, how you got into blockchain, how you got into Ethereum. A lot of the hackathon participants, they're putting in, those nights and weekends hours. I'd love for them to just kind of hear your story, how you got started. So actually, in preparation for this, I went back and read your original blog post on your big break into Ethereum, which for those of you, if you haven't read it, go and find Austin on Medium. It's a really, really great story. But yeah, I'd love to hear about, like, you were working on things like concurrence, Clevis. What happened there? Where did those ideas come from? And what did you learn from those projects?
Word, yeah, awesome. So I do have like some slides that could kind of go with this. You want me just to share those too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Please.
So when you're saying nights and weekends, there were a lot of those. There were a lot of nights and weekends leading up to actually having something of value, and I can kind of go over that a little bit. So I'm Austin Griffith, Director of Research at Gitcoin. That's my son with a bucket on his head. And how user experience is in the space right now. The first thing I worked on was concurrence. It was like a decentralized Oracle, and I realized pretty early into it that I did not have the chops for that. It was a very heady project. I knew that it needed to happen in this space, but I was not the person to do it at the time. But I learned a lot of stuff, and I learned how to kind of orchestrate a lot of stuff, and that's where Clevis came from. It's sort of this kind of command line orchestration that allows me to compile, test, deploy smart contracts, but it also injects it into my front end.
So Clevis actually came out of concurrence. Is that correct?
Yeah, sort of concurrence was like, okay, I'm learning how to deploy contracts. I'm learning how Solidity works. I'm learning kind of just like the mechanics of how it all works. And in doing that, I played around with Truffle, but it was confusing to me. There are parts that just didn't seem to make like intuitive sense. So I started building sort of a similar thing to do that, but with the thought in mind that it would wire directly into the front end. So your back end and front end would kind of be more coherent. And I think that Truffle ended up making Drizzle, which was a similar thing and probably way better, but this works for me. So that's the easy part.
I love this. And, as entrepreneurs, builders, developers, we all like to have this tendency to kind of fall in love with our idea and start building and shipping right away. Well, I'm curious why, you kind of mentioned a couple of reasons, but I'm curious why you think concurrence or Clevis didn't work out. What was kind of the misstep there in your opinion?
Well, with concurrence, I think it is game theory and things way beyond me. And I think that I was very new to the space, and the space was in a really weird place where people were dropping giant ICOs and stuff. And I thought that I could just like kind of lay the groundwork for this decentralized Oracle, and other people would kind of jump on board with me and start building. And it was just like, I put it on like /r/eth dev, and it, just to the sound of crickets, basically. Like I deployed this whole giant site and all this, like it was basically a white paper in HTML and had code examples and had a way to like build it and work on it, and no one gave a shit.
Yeah, it's so funny. We actually just shipped a piece of content the other day with just that exact narrative. They're the detriment as builders, as entrepreneurs, to build things and then ship them to crickets, which nobody cares about. And really one of the things that we've been trying to harp on as a part of this hackathon is using signals and trying to find signals to find things that people actually care about. I wonder, kind of in that vein, so that you went from concurrence and Clevis, and then you started moving into game development, and there was some really cool stuff that you started playing around with. Yeah, there it is.
So Gallias, Gallias was probably the first game, and so Gallias was sort of I had built some of this I made some of the original the original media for the game back like maybe 8 years ago. I used to be kind of a Facebook game developer, and this was eventually probably going to be a Facebook game, and I kind of got disenfranchised by Facebook game development. I don't know what it is, but I would put out an update to my Facebook game, and I would get like death threats because I changed the mechanic, and that was kind of like started weighing on me for a while. And even though it was paying the bills, it was like, I can't do this anymore. And so like I kind of went away from game development, did cloud development for a while. But within game development, I had made these assets, and they're these hand-painted ships and hand-painted land tiles. The whole thing is painted with oil, and then I took a picture of it and brought it into the game. So if you go to gallias.io, you see this big wide painting, and it's actually people are participating. So this is like a player, right? And this is a player. And there's all these neat concepts that came from building a blockchain game and this new paradigm of, well, people will have to click something and then wait for the transaction to go through. And there's also this idea of these blocks being mined. So there's kind of this process that's ever moving. And so I set it up so even the clouds are in a smart contract. The clouds are in the contract, and they move a direction each time a block is mined. So you see the whole world kind of move a little bit as each block is mined. And the same thing with the sails on the ships. You send a transaction to put up your sails, and then your ship just moves in the direction that it goes for each block that is mined.
Super cool. So this is actually going to be a common theme, because I think all really good entrepreneurs or people with entrepreneurial instincts learn how to repurpose or reuse things even when they fail. And that's kind of like that iterative process, which I want to talk about a lot, because you've done that quite a bit. Where did this original, what were you trying to learn with the development of this game, or what were you trying to teach yourself, or like why did you pivot from concurrence and Clavis over to like game development? What problem were you trying to solve, or what was your thought process?
So yeah, I would say that if we look at concurrence, there's definitely some very heady things there. And I'm like not a super high level academic, right? I'm kind of just like a get it done messy kind of guy. And I think that if I were to look at the Venn diagram of my talents and then find where it's probably most applicable to the space, it's sort of this connection of art and building and kind of trying to find things out on the edge. So I saw Gallias as a way for me to create something, truly unique within the space, something that people hadn't seen before. It was a chance to learn about how tokens could interact, how we could do crafting, how we could have NFTs that were ships that could carry, ERC20s that were like timber and gold could move. And you can see copper down here at the market, and there's meat from like a cow tile. It's very much like Settlers of Catan, but
Settlers of Catan. That's what I was going to say. Yes.
Yeah. But going back to, so, and even like techniques on chain, like commit reveal, right? Commit reveal randomness. You need randomness in games, and randomness is hard on chain. So it was like a new thing that I had to learn and figure out. So when you have one of those little sailing ships, you cast out, and that is your commit on chain. And then you have a second transaction where you reel in, and that's the reveal. And if you get a high enough random number and you're close enough to one of these fish down here, you'll actually catch a fish. And the fish is an ERC20 that you can sell to the fishmonger, who will process it and give you a fillet back and put the fish back in the water. There's an interesting mechanic where it all kind of comes full circle. But to bring things full circle a little bit back to the Facebook game where I was getting death threats for making a change, in Gallias, everything is deployed to IPFS with a full contract push.
Oh,
so what happens is every time I do a major deployment, it's like a fork in the game, and people can choose to follow whichever one they want, right? So there's no more death threats, because it's like, well, then just go follow the other fork of the game if you don't like this new change. So that was a really fun thing. And I also, it introduced me to Gitcoin bounties, and most importantly, probably the fact that it is hard as hell to do onboarding in a blockchain game right now. Basically, everyone's just kind of like selling stuff, and there's no game mechanics. So like bringing people in and having people play, and just like that huge barrier to entry, the 95% of people that drop off when you tell them they need to go download MetaMask and have Ethereum, right? Yeah. So that was where I learned the lesson of onboarding here, and that continued on to Cryptogs. I made Pogs on the blockchain. at ETH Denver 2018 with a small team. And again, fun game, great way to do NFTs and collectibles. Would love to see it be successful, but again, onboarding sucks.
Yeah.
and it's just really hard to do. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, no, so this is great. I mean, so there's a couple of themes here that I'm picking up on. One, figuring out what to build is a combination of looking for signals, but also leveraging the things where you have an unfair competitive advantage, right? So these are things that you were already interested in, and that led to, it sounds like that led to like that. Oh, I'm going to try that, or I'm going to build this, or I'm going to create that because I'm like interested in these things, and you'd already been doing Facebook game development. But it's also a great way to try to find problems that can lead to bigger and better things. And we're going to get there in a second, but is that kind of a fair way to frame?
Absolutely. Like almost like adding, like making it fun to learn about tokens and making it fun to deploy contracts. I mean, it is fun for me, but it's probably not fun for like the average person working on this. So it needs to be like, we need to make it more fun and more enjoyable, right?
What I love that you've done here is with these couple of games is you've taken a very game designer kind of lens on it, which is a set of mechanics that needs some kind of story wrapped around it, right? And you're saying, let's look at the mechanics of a blockchain, any action on the blockchain, and understand how we can actually use those mechanics to tell a distinctive story of actions.
And use them in our favor instead of against us, right? Word.
Yeah, that's so good. So there's actually a quote in a pull quote from your Medium post that I pulled out. I kept working nights and weekends, hoping to find my way into the Ethereum ecosystem. I just wanted to provide value and create something useful, or at least something fun to play. It wasn't easy. I'd love to hear, so coming out of these kind of like 4 projects, what were you looking for? What was your process? How did you go about finding something valuable? Because eventually you landed on something. I think Blockie miner was something that you started getting a little bit of interest in. You found this issue that you wrote about on React Service that Evan Van Ness eventually started talking about. How did you go about finding those signals of creating something valuable?
It's interesting, and this is probably like I'm laying on a couch with my psychiatrist right now when I answer this, because I think that when I first came into the space, I probably was kind of at this like concurrence level where it's like, I'm going to put out this white paper and make a shitload of money, right? And I think that that's a bad thing. Like, we hate speculators in the space, but I think we need to be true with ourselves and saying that probably a lot of us got into this space because of that speculation. So I was probably kind of making the transition between making a speculative token in my mind, like making me a token that is speculative, to making me a token that is utility, right? So it was like getting on Twitter and finding what people were talking about, finding the problems that they were having. The Blockie miner was something that I made sort of just to prove that, like, hey, we have these blockies and they're really great because they can deterministically tell us who this user is, but look what we can do. We can kind of pixel by pixel compare someone else's Blockie, and we could jam on it, creating Ethereum accounts until we find one that's similar. And so if I just were to eyeball these 2 Blockies here, I would probably not like quickly see the difference between 2 screens, and that could be used for like phishing and taking money from someone, right? And I think that's the first time Alex Van de Zandt kind of gave me a retweet, and that was sort of like how it starts to work, right? You can think that you're going to like ICO and go to the moon, but what you really need to be doing is like finding where people are having struggles and like building these things that are useful or at least entertaining, right? And that's where the Nifties versus Nifties, I saw that they were kind of like joking about on-chain governance and also like, do we have an I in Nifty? So I made these things that you could mint, and it would randomly generate their genetics. So their genetics, like whether or not which like set of eyes they have or which accessory they have, was all based on the hash. And it was all a joke kind of on blockchain governance, where you could buy one or the other depending on whether you wanted to see Nifty spelled with an I or not.
That's hilarious.
But that was silly, right? That's just like silly entertaining stuff, kind of just trying to engage the community, building tools. But I think to answer that, like we really, I think I finally got in with Bouncer Proxy. I think once we started seeing more people focus on UX and more people focus on that onboarding thing and how everybody has to have ETH, that's where the meta transaction stuff came in.
So it's funny. I think Alex comes full circle for you, right? So you read a post that he posted, or a YouTube video or something around universal login.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
And I think that was kind of your, quote unquote goosebumps moment where you're like, oh shit, that's
Right.
a problem. That's a problem to solve. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And I love that this narrative comes full circle.
I wonder if I could find that. So he was, I mean, it was probably about this time last year, I think. He was talking about how we should be respecting signed transactions. Like basically you have this really cool EC recover function. Where is it? You have this really cool EC recover function. Here it is right here, that lets you in a smart contract tell what someone signed. And the properties there are pretty astounding, because you can have something that's cryptographically backed, but it's just a signed message. It's not a full-on transaction. So you can have relayers doing the transactions, but you could have these signed messages. And for him, it was about, you can have these signers that are like on your phone that don't have any ETH, that have control of funds in some other way. So then we're not moving private keys around. We can just basically dictate what we're doing on chain with signed messages from accounts that don't have any ETH.
Yeah, super cool. And so I guess you're using all these product iterations. You're rehashing different pieces, as your collective IP, as you continue building and creating. And now you land on a problem. Oh shit, you've been doing enough building, enough iterating, that now you've identified a real problem, and now you've got a track that you want to go down. So that kind of takes us to some of the work that you're doing today. So you officially came on, you joined the Gitcoin team on the research side. When was that? That was November of 2018?
Yeah, somewhere around DevCon. Yep.
And how long had you been kind of building hacking during the nights and weekends leading up to that point? About a year or so, it sounds like?
Many months, yes. If not a full year, like many months. I mean, it was like I would go to my day job, I would come home.
Yep.
I had a kid at home. He would sit on my lap as I'm, writing Solidity. Like there was a lot of nights and weekends and a lot of stress. I think I mentioned it a little bit in the article. Like my wife, but like the word blockchain is still actually not allowed in my house.
Oh man, I love that. I mean, I don't love that, but I can relate. And I think many of the hackathon participants right now who are in this Ethereum virtual hackathon absolutely know what you're talking about. And I think the one benefit as a part of this hackathon is that at least as you're trying to bootstrap your idea or your company, there's a financial incentive, right? Like we can help at least cushion a little bit as you start building. But so cool. So I want to talk about your work with Bernard Wallace. You have kind of this goosebump moment that takes you to UX, that takes you to meta transactions. Oh, there we go. Yes. Can we talk a little bit about, so I'm sure most people within this community are familiar with what you're doing with Bernard Wallet, but just in case, can you kind of just give us the lay of the land? What are meta transactions? Why are they so important for a seamless UX experience? How did you kind of start, fucking your way through this process? discovering kind of like the holy grail of solving this UX issue.
Well, I mean, it goes back to the games, right? Like, is there a way that someone doesn't have to have ETH? Is there a way that someone can still interact with a smart contract, but not have all of these barriers to entry, right? So the creating of an Ethereum account, as we learned from the Blockie miner, is extremely easy. You don't need anybody's permission. You need cryptography from 1983, right? And it takes, a millisecond to create. So creating an account is very easy. But getting ETH into that account and then probably downloading MetaMask, like those things are tough. And that's a hard ask for someone. You can convince them later, right? Like our theory is that you can hit someone with a 12-word seed phrase after they have something and they want to protect something. They're going to be incentivized to learn that stuff, to download the stuff. But up front, boy, you better hit them with something fun and either useful or engaging, not a 12-word seed phrase right away, or you're going to get that 95% drop off. So that's where meta transactions came in. It's like, let's let them get into the game. Let's let them, I think I did so at DevCon, I did a build where we live coded up this app that was called Once Upon a Time that allows for anyone to collaboratively write a story, and they don't have to have ETH or even MetaMask. They land on a website, and they can see other people putting lines into the story, and then they can type up their own line and they can hit write. And what that does is it takes an ephemeral account that's generated when they land on a page, it signs the message, and it sends it to a relayer, and the relayer puts it on chain, the relayer pays the gas, but their stuff makes it to chain, and you can tell from that transaction with the smart contract that it was them that signed it. And so all of a sudden you have like all these people interacting on a website without having to have MetaMask and without having to have ETH. And I think that that's like the exciting piece there. And that's how I think we can drive onboarding in the space.
I love it. Yeah. And this is kind of like, again, like I don't want to be too superfluous as I talk about this, but I think the holy grail for consumer adoption within this ecosystem is figuring out the UX problem. And that's why I'm so excited about some of the things that you're doing. But even more importantly, I think starting to gamify the experience. And I want to talk about that when we get to Emoji Exchange. Before we get there, what I love is you're starting to build and iterate on the burner wallet. You get it into the real world almost as quickly as possible. Like I looked at the Medium articles that you were publishing as you were going through the research stage and the kind of the build stage. And I think one of your first in real world tests was at the Cypherpunk meetup. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So one thing to hint at the burner wallet is kind of the collision of mainstream adoption and emerging economies. Sorry, I'm gonna like tangent, and we'll come back to the Cypherpunk speaking.
No, definitely.
One thing to get here is like this theory that maybe blockchains are useless in the perfect world, and if we want to see mass adoption, we need to provide all this great experience, but we also probably need to do it in places that need it most, right? A lot of us use blockchain as kind of theater. It's not really necessary. We need to find places that decentralization is absolutely necessary, and then apply all these other mainstream adoption techniques and see how it takes off. And that's where the burner wallet came about. We realized that like there are these emerging economies that could have a quick little web wallet that could exchange funds quickly. It's analogous to cash, so you don't put a ton of money in there. You can spend it quickly. If you lose it, it's not that big of a deal. It's sad, but it's not that big of a deal, right? It's only 10, 15, 20, 30 bucks. It's not thousands of dollars. So we saw that the burner actually got some legs, and we kind of put out a bunch of bounties and got it kind of styled up nicely. We translated it to different languages, and then we just started doing these UX experiments like you alluded to with the Cypherpunk speakeasies.
I want to go real quick. I want to backtrack just a little bit. You said that we saw that we were starting to get traction. What were you doing? What experiments were you running? How were you starting to see traction? What were some of the signals that you were starting to get? And how were you coming up with those experiments to get those signals?
So my signals at this point were all within the space. These are great questions, by the way. Thanks for having me on here. This is an awesome discussion. So the signals were actually within the space. They were not external, like I'm going to get my mom to send money around. And I did, like, sitting around with my dad and my little brother having beers, I did pull out a burner wallet and send them $2, but they're just both like, what the hell do I do with this, right? Like there was not that magic moment. However, within the space at places like DevCon, when I pulled out this ugly QR code looking wallet, and we're sitting around at a party, and it's like, boom, I just sent you $5, and then you sent the next guy $4, and then he sent the next guy $3, and it's happening like that quickly, and we're moving funds around. There's like goosebumps in the circle, right? And that's when I knew that's the traction I was getting. So it was very like one-on-one, just feeling out what people in the space thought of it. And even moments where I would like walk into a party at DevCon and there was someone across the room that was like using a burner wallet back and forth just as a fun demo. Like that's when I knew that we had something. And that led to like the idea that maybe we could use this at ETH Denver, which sort of led to the Cypherpunk speakeasies. You want me to jump on that now?
Yeah, in 1 second, dude.
Okay.
I'm like loving this because what we harp on and what I try to harp on a lot with both the entrepreneurs in labs, but also we've even been trying to teach a lot of the hackathon participants this lesson is if you want to get big, you got to get small first. You have to find small communities, small pockets of people who, one, are going to put up with your shitty V1, but two, where you can find evangelists early and often and start to get that traction. So, I mean, like this is just textbook how you build a product and start to get that traction. And so now I want to talk about the Cypherpunk meetup. Because that almost seems like, and I don't know if you planned it this way, but it almost seems like that was kind of your lightweight in real life test leading into the ETH Denver event, which I think was kind of really where you rolled it out. And it was like, I loved seeing Burner Wallet like show up at ETH Denver and like following that whole thing. I mean, that was just so fucking cool. So maybe if we can start with Cypherpunk and then what you were doing and how that led into ETH Denver, I'd love to hear that story and narrative.
For sure. Yeah. So basically it's maybe 7 weeks before ETH Denver. We've decided we are going to try to use the Burner Wallet to have people buy things at food trucks, maybe, if we can make it work, right? There's like a big maybe, because when you talk about a lot of people using crypto to buy things, you know the user experience you've had before, and you know it's not a good idea. So, I had a buddy in Boulder that was going to have this meetup, and I went and joined, and this is like the second time I had ever met him. Very smart guy, Brian Ethier. And we hung out, and he's like, okay, they're coming in. It's a meetup. I think it was a blockchain meetup. They're going to come in, and we're going to accept Bitcoin and Ethereum to buy these beers. And I was like, okay, that's a good idea. But a lot of people aren't going to have Bitcoin or ETH, so they're going to need to onboard it first. So we decided to have this like mental split between the real world right now and the future world where banks were, basically gone, and you had to interact. You had to transfer money with cryptocurrency because it was the only thing left, right? It's this sort of dystopian or utopian, depending on your point of view. I
love this
mentality, right? So there's 2 rooms. So you had to onboard in room 1. You had to onboard because we had to because obviously a guy's going to walk in the room with $10 of cash and say, why the hell can't I just give this to the bartender and buy the beer, right? So you had to like create this cognitive disconnect of, yes, in the current world, you could hand the bartender a $10 bill of beer. But in the Cypherpunk speakeasy world, where we're in the future and we're using blockchain to buy our beers, we actually priced the beer. You could see it. I think it's in one of the articles, but we priced the beer. You could buy a beer in cash. We allowed it, but it was about $2 million for a beer. So if you happen to have like $2 million in cash around, it could be inflation, but the US dollar was so far inflated, and the banks were thus, dissolved, so you had to use crypto. And that's kind of where the idea of this Cypherpunk speakeasy came from. But for us, it was kind of like this low-key way to test out the Burner Wallet. So what we would do is we would take Bitcoin and Ethereum, but we also would allow you to use this Burner Wallet on XDAI. And it was so fun to see people start using it. But that first night, the onboarding was bad. You had to give $10 to a guy. The guy would give you some XDAI, then you would go in the other room and use the XDAI. So that's where the paper wallet idea came from. Basically, we need a way to drop accounts with funds in a way that's sort of kind of like a collectible. It's kind of like something you would hold on to, and then inside of that is a private key. And so you would come to one of our events. So 6 weeks leading up to ETH Denver, 1 per week. We just took over a bar in northern Colorado, a different town each time.
How did you get to the bar? Did you guys know the bar owner? I love that you guys are like, you're like pitching and you're getting the product into real life, like right away within safe constraints and safe domains, but like you're iterating and you're getting it out there. I'd love to just hear like a little bit more about that process. Was it difficult? Were you literally picking up the phone and calling bar owners? Like what was happening there?
So Brian did the very first pitch, and he went in and he said, hey, we want to have this event. We'll have these paper wallets. They'll come up, they'll buy beer. You'll see it right on an iPad that they bought the beer. You just give them the beer. And then at the end of the night, we'll pay you in cash. And then he just stopped and waited for the guy to respond. And the bartender's like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And I think the killer piece was no credit card fees, right?
Yeah.
We were going to pay.
There it is. That's what yes.
So we were able to sell it to a lot of these bartenders. So I did have, at a lot of the breweries and bars, I had buddies that were either running the bar or knew someone that was running the bar. We did one in Tinmouth, Colorado, where my buddy's the head brewer. So it's like I had connections to these places, but not in a way where like we were getting away with anything serious. Like it still had to be a money-making thing for the bar. And
you guys were still solving a real problem for a real customer, which was, hey, no credit card transaction fees, more money in your pocket. Beautiful.
And for us, we got to do a lot of one-on-one user testing, right? There'd be like 15 to 30 people at these events. And so I could watch where each one of them purchased and where their thumb went and where their eyes were looking and what took too long and what was confusing and what was working. And we were able to just, each week we would just have a list of things that we saw that day. And then during that week, we would prioritize and attack those. We would deploy a new version of the wallet and we'd go do it all again the next week at a new bar with new people until it was nice and smooth. And I think that so there's a really good video on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh man, yes.
Bucks, but they like print out patty bucks, and then there's like all these like carny type guys that are in like Winnebagos out front, and they give them the fake money to buy beer because they want to like stimulate the economy. But at the end of the night, they get all their fake money back, and they're out of beer, which was exactly what Brian and I were doing with these things, right? So it was such a funny like juxtaposition of us and the guys from Sunny.
Let that be a lesson to all of our hackathon participants, all the people building. You can find inspiration and ideas from anywhere, but you got to solve real problems for people. I think that's kind of the moral of the story here. I love it. So let's so you use this almost as your proof of concept leading up to ETH Denver, and ETH Denver is kind of like the big rollout, right? Yep. And so there are a lot of moving pieces here. I think you had non-fungible tokens inside of the wallet at launch. You figured out the XDAI integration. So I'd love to hear what you learned coming out of these proof of concept events, these cypherpunk meetups, and then how that informed a successful rollout at ETH Denver. Because I think ETH Denver, as smooth as a new product launch can go, was pretty fucking baller.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, so yeah, because we had done all those UX studies, we kind of knew that 80% of the people were just going to have a happy path. They were going to, you can see it here. They were going to get their solid coin. They were going to scan it with their phone. Then that was just going to take them to a web page that was a wallet that had money. Then they could go up to the food truck. They could scan the thing. The food truck would see that they had purchased it, and they would get their food. And that worked really great. We sold like 4,400 meals. Food trucks off-ramped in DAI about 40K using SendWire, and the whole transaction fees were like 20 cents. So it was like crazy cheap. It was way better than credit cards. Yeah. Even what SendWire took out was a small fraction compared to what the credit cards took.
Yeah, and again, like another theme here, and I don't want to harp on this, but I think it's really important, is as a part of this cool thing that you had figured out and you guys were rolling out, you were actually solving real problems for the food truck vendors. And so that was kind of how you got the buy-in from them to experiment with this burner wallet idea. Yeah, that is great.
But it was still clunky, right? Like this is still like the food truck still had to kind of train people on what a QR code was. The food truck still had to tell you that you had to hit the send button, right? Like it's not like 100% intuitive yet. There's that other 20%.
You know what's so important about that though? Like, because you were solving a real problem for these guys, I loved reading this in your Medium piece. They were so bought in. They were actually, now here you've got these food truck guys teaching blockchain experts how to use the burner wallet.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Because they actually wanted to use this technology because there was more cash in their pocket. It just made sense.
It was really cool. There was this really cool moment where I'm like walking up and down the food trucks where I realized that I wasn't needed anymore. Right. And like, I could go sit down and have a beer. It was such a, like an delightful moment, I guess. Like I saw into the future, basically. It was so cool. But it was food trucks helping, and it was so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that is just, iterating your product, finding customers, finding early evangelists 101. I mean, it's really like, it's the playbook for how you build and launch a product. I think that's really, really cool. I know I want to be super respectful of your time because I know you got a lot going on. I'd love to pivot over to you talking a little bit about what's next for the burner wallet. So there's a couple of things that I think I know that you're working on. You're starting to think about the burner wallet as a platform, which I think is really cool to see this product now kind of iterate and grow into how you're starting to think about it. Emoji.exchange was really cool. I know burner wallet is now part of the Gas Network Alliance. And so I guess the framing or the container that I might put on this, and feel free to go in any of those directions that you want to, is one, how you iterated this product and product development, solving real problems and getting feedback from customers into turning it into a real thing, but how you're now still using those same principles as Burner Wallet starts to evolve and grow and develop and change.
Okay, yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, it still comes down to like all the way back to what the mass adoption stuff was talking about in the beginning, right? Abstracting away some of this stuff. So I think of it sort of in layers, like almost like a game. Like there's levels, right? Level 1 of Mario. Level 1 of the Burner Wallet is just sending and receiving funds. Almost also like setting up a POS system, right? Usually I lead with the demo, but I was assuming you guys already had Burner Wallets and stuff, but I can send you money back and forth from this video feed, right? And even that, I could set up a POS system, right? So if I was here selling, you know, sunglasses, I could go set up on the street and sell sunglasses with the Burner Wallet by just navigating to xdai.io and then hitting the request button and typing in sunglasses $15. And what I'll have there is basically a QR code that says that if you scan this code, it's going to take you to buy sunglasses from me for $15. You hit send and it's done, right? So you can set up a pop-up POS system, you can send and receive. That's level 1. Level 2 is then a little bit more gamification. It's about teaching the user how to create permanence within their wallet, right? What happens if your phone drops in the toilet? Are you gonna be able to recover those funds? And so to do that, we've kind of explored a few different ways. Like, do we hit you with an emoji seed phrase? And so at ETH Paris, I did alligator fist bump was my entire seed phrase, and I put $5 in it, and it like immediately was gone. Someone was able to take that out of there. And also like a Gnosis safe. So we're going to be deploying a Gnosis safe. They've already put out the factory contract on xDai. But I think that would be a really cool way to say, oh, hey, you've got $10 here. Like, we're not going to hit them until they have money, right? Like, first you should play on level 1 for a little while and figure it out. But once you're past level 1 and you've got $10 in there and you want to protect it, hey, hit this one button and we'll deploy a Gnosis safe for you on xDai, and then scan in your laptop and it'll be an N of M signer. So now all of a sudden you have permanence and you have a safe that you can deposit and withdraw from quickly because it's on xDai. But if you drop your phone in the toilet, you can go to your laptop and you can recover those funds out of that safe. So I think permanence is kind of level 2. And then, like you said, like level 3 is sort of the modular system, like the platform. Once someone has money in their pocket, what are they going to want to do with it, right? Like my mom has a Burner Wallet. She has $5 in a Burner Wallet, but what is she going to do with it, right? Like unless there's like a whole economy around sending and receiving, which I hope there will be, right? I hope that like I don't have to go to every conference and shill the Burner Wallet. I think that eventually there's going to be like, hey, there's a t-shirt stand that just takes xDai or whatever is running it on the Burner Wallet, and you can just walk up and spend whatever token you need using a Burner Wallet. But that's level 1 to the extreme down the road, right? So back to kind of the emoji coin.exchange thing that you said. Basically, I wanted to set it up so the Burner Wallet was a lot more extensible. And I set up this article, I think it's called, if you look, Burner Modules. Yeah, Burner Modules is what it's called. But basically what I did was take a branch of the Burner Wallet and then set up this, here's all the instructions, like line for line how you do this. But it lands you on.
That's what I was going to say. This is great. Yeah. So like literally people can go and start playing with this immediately if they want to start doing this is a part of their nights and weekends. Yeah. Keep going. Keep going. Sorry.
You run these 6 or 7 commands, and it takes like 5 minutes because I have a bunch of stuff that has to come in, including Clevis and Dapparatus, things that we've talked about earlier. But you kind of end up with this nice little scaffolding that says like, hey, here's your connection to all these different networks. Here's we've already hit a bunch of APIs and given you gas prices and ETH prices, and here's all the buttons and what they look like. Here's how you could hit a button to deploy a contract. Here's how you send and receive. Just like a bunch of scaffolding that allows the user to sort of quickly just dive in and kind of have everything already and just sort of build a little dApp within the burner using all the stuff, that the framework that's sort of provided for you. And then you can sort of like easily extend it. Like I can take your module and I could plug it into the burner any way we want. So we've got like Helena prediction markets. We've got the Connects guys and their sending channel on mainnet. We've got so cool. Gnosis Safe, just all sorts of these modules coming in. And we would love the community to dive in and help us out with just building more modules. And like, I'm going to put a bounty up for Kudos in the burner wallet. And I bet by this time tomorrow, we'll just have Kudos in the burner wallet because it's so easy to extend and build on.
That's so cool. So I'm going to pivot us into the current bounty that you have for this hackathon. Before I do, there's another quote that I pulled from one of your articles with it, which I thought was really great. And I'll preface this with, we actually published a piece recently on how to launch your blockchain startup without writing a single line of code. 3 ideas that you can use to try to get started in finding signals that tell you that you're building the right thing. And one of them is using content as a product. And so my segue here is one of the things that I think you do really, really well in this community, and this is actually a quote from you. You once said on one of your articles, open sourcing is no longer good enough. We must evangelize and educate to drive adoption. And you put out just so much content about what you're doing. It's rough, it's ugly, it's clunky, it's not done. You ask people to tear it apart, to give you feedback, to hit up your GitHub repo. Like, you're actively involved in the community, but I think that's one of the important things for builders and entrepreneurs and people looking for signals in the marketplace, is to not be in a silo, not be in your own world, but to get out of the building a little bit and publish stuff and then get that feedback from the community. I mean, that is literally how you got into this community and how you started building stuff. I mean, is that kind of accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I could even illustrate this point a little bit more by going back to Concurrence Austin, the guy who was gonna, make millions of dollars with his stupid idea. Like, I spent many nights and weekends writing the copy, writing the code, writing all this stuff in secret, spending so much time preparing something. And then when I tried to release it, it was to crickets, right? As opposed to something like emojicoin.exchange, where this is the smart contract. I wrote it in 15 minutes. Like, this is the UI. I built it in 4 hours. And then it was like, I was just supposed to go talk to this college class about kind of similar stuff that we're talking about. And it was like, well, while I'm at that class, I'm just going to throw a bunch of paper wallets at them and see what happens, right? And then it like worked, and people used it and played on it, and there was tons of thumb traffic. So I was able to use that as just another weekly article of like, check out, like, we can get adoption by doing it. Like, this is a way to onboard people. They don't even know that, like, they're mashing their thumbs buying and selling. They don't know that they're interacting with a smart contract, but they are. Each little tap there is another transaction with an incremented nonce buying and selling these emojis. Like a fun, silly little game. It can be gamed. The smart contract is not sound. It's meant to be gamed, but it's fun. It drives adoption. And, I could have just as easily put this out and no one gave a shit also. And it would have been 5 hours of wasted work, and I iterate, right? So I think we do need to ship early and ship often.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Great. So tell us a little bit about the, those onboarding user traction numbers for Emoji Coin were absolutely ridiculous. I mean, like, I think I sent this to you in a message. Like, I sent this out to several growth engineering friends. I was like, look at the fucking numbers on this thing. Like, this is insane.
You think about right now, a DApp, a decentralized application, has a drop off of like 95% when people come into the app because of all the onboarding. And then you think of this same thing, we had 80% of the users using it immediately. Like, you can see it. Like, the minute I handed out those wallets, it's like jumps to 50 transactions per minute and doesn't stop. Like, we were getting thousands of transactions. It was great.
That's great. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I guess to wrap up here, tell us a little bit about this hackathon. What's the ask for the community for people who don't know? So Labs has a couple of DeFi bounties out. You have one that's out. I think you want people to build on top of the burner modules. Tell us a little bit about the bounty that you have out for this Ethereal virtual hackathon.
That's exactly right. So leading up to Ethereal, I was kind of hoping to have funding and a team and all sorts of unicorn situations, Austin's magical sandbox where we build all this rad shit. That did not happen. So I'm hoping that that Austin's magical sandbox can sort of be more of a community thing. And that's where the burner modules idea came from. It's like, let's make this thing super extensible. Let's give someone else a nice little playground so they can just get right to writing their app. And then it'll be a module within a product that I can deploy out and get this onboarding to these games. So you build a game, I'll bring people in. I'll print out the paper wallets. I'll fold and glue and cut every single one of them, and we'll drive people in. And it's like
Sweet.
Amy Jung did a really cool thing in Berlin where they did an Eventbrite event, and instead of giving paper wallets, they just sent the link that comes with the paper wallet that you scan out to everybody in emails. And Eventbrite kind of broke, I think, but other than that, it worked, right? So I think I want to do that again for emojicoin.exchange. I think I want to get everybody in, and I want to play it, but without paper wallets. I just want to ship private keys to like 400 people and see how they play, or even maybe like make them tweet something, and if they tweet a certain thing, then I'll send them a private key with the funds. But to the ask, so we want to kind of do this same thing. We want to get you in building a burner module. You just follow these instructions. It takes a little bit to get this going, but basically you set up a little blockchain, you set up a burner wallet locally, and it'll drop you right into this page. And it honestly took me like 5 hours to build all of emojicoin.exchange. So we're hoping that like we can come up with these simple little game mechanics that, again, like sort of illustrate the cool parts of the blockchain and just get them into the burner, so then we can get more people playing it, and hopefully by Ethereal have a few things in the wallet beyond just buying food at food trucks. And I'm crossing my fingers that even works, because seriously, it was like landing on the moon for us, getting all that to work perfectly. I know it's like a silly analogy, but gosh, it was so much work getting that ready to go. And now we're just talking about doing it again. Like I was dead for 3 days after that. I don't know why I'm doing it.
I love it. Okay, great. So, for this hackathon, where can people find you if they have questions? You're in Discord, you're pretty active in there. I think you've even got one of the bounty Discord channels. Is that the best way to kind of reach out to you specific to this? Okay, great.
So if you Google burner modules, I think there's probably
I'm going to put a link in the show notes as well. Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Probably a link. Oh, it's not here. Actually, I think you might have to Google emojicoin.exchange, the Medium article of emojicoin.exchange. There's a link there. Basically, the links that I'm looking for are, gosh, look at that traffic. This is where the students figured out how to automate it, and then they just were running arbitrage between let's see, conclusion. Here we go. In the conclusion, here we go. There's some links here. So there's a GitHub issue here, and then there's actually, I think it might just be the GitHub issue. Yeah, so
GitHub issue, great.
There's a Discord channel called Build a Game with Austin, and then there is this GitHub issue. And within this GitHub issue, we're just kind of like throwing out ideas for games, throwing out smart contracts, just any ideas you have, or if you want to work with me, hit me up on Discord, post your contract up here, post your game mechanics. Let's make a super, super simple game, and let's get it in the burner so then people at Ethereal can play it.
Yeah, awesome. And I'll definitely put that in the show notes, and we'll make sure to plug it as well. Last two things. One, for people either within the hackathon or outside, where's the best place for them to reach you? Would it be your Medium channel and Twitter maybe?
Yeah, basically when I put out something, I'll build a medium around it, right? So I build the project, then I'll build a medium around it. Then I'll do a screencast that goes through the medium, and then I'll tweet the whole thing, right? So Twitter's probably like the kickoff point to get a hold of me and follow what I'm doing. And then, like you said, you could dive into the medium, follow my YouTube stuff, but reach out to me. Like, I don't say no to people who put stuff on my calendar, and I just show up and we have a call. So if you want to get on a Zoom with me and talk about stuff, hit
awesome.
up. I'm at Austin Griffith on Telegram and Twitter, and we can take it from there.
Sweet. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. Last question. We've got a lot of people who are just starting off in the Ethereum community, and as a part of this hackathon, people who've got some really cool projects and ideas. What advice do you have for people who are kind of like watching this, who are trying to get their product off the ground, who are like nights and weekends warriors trying to get it done? Like, what advice would you give them?
Hell yes. So the first thing, and people even ask me like how we kind of foster this within the space. You're going to have to build some turds for a while. Like, you will build some pieces of crap. Don't fall in love with them. Iterate on them, right? Build a piece of crap, see what people think. Build another piece of crap and see what people think. And eventually you'll have everything taped together with duct tape, and something will get some traction and people will start retweeting it. And I think that that's a really good signal, is once people start getting into it and using it, then you've got something. But don't stay quiet and build out this entire white paper and think that you need to like have an NDA for people to see your idea. Your idea is not that good. Your execution is what's important, and iterate on it. Lots of iterations.
I love it. Austin, thank you so much, man. It's been such a pleasure. I think, what you're doing is so cool, not only for the community, but just really inspiring I think the next generation of builders in the space. And so I just want to say thank you. And this has just been so much fun for me, and really, really appreciate your time. All of you that are watching, here at Consensys Labs, we're really trying to iterate on this hackathon idea. We want to find more people who want to build really cool stuff. So we'll include a lot of show notes, a lot of links to stuff. Austin is really lending himself out to there. If you've got something cool, do us a favor, go through. He posts a lot of great content in Medium, so check that out. He's got a lot of great readmes in his GitHub repository as well. But really, really excited to see what people come out of with this hackathon, and look forward to future hackathons and future builds with Austin. Thank you so much for your time again, man.
Thanks again for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed
awesome.
it.
All right, guys. Bye-bye.
See ya.